They didn't accept it. They criticised it heavily. So during that particular meeting, in fact, where they criticised it, Klimt and his friends left. And then they had to be independent.
The founders of the secession were keen to show the Viennese public that art had moved on from the stuffy academic approach favoured by the Kunstlerhaus leadership. In 1898, the first secession exhibition took place. The venue was a dedicated building strongly influenced by the contemporary spirit of Art Nouveau.
It's quite interesting that they had a great deal of backing, actually, because, for instance, they had a new building built for their secession. And that must, of course, you know, they must have had tremendous amount of backing there. And that in itself was a symbol of the new ideas in architecture.
We can also see the characteristic curving lines of Art Nouveau in this poster designed by Klimt to promote the first secession event.
Art Nouveau was a European movement, but the Austrians would have known mostly about the English manifestation of Mackintosh and his wife, and Aubrey Beardsley and Whistler. And what they liked about it was the symbolism, for a start, and the emphasis on design, the sinuous movements, natural forms. It was the antithesis of realism, really. It was something artificial, something exciting, something that you could read deeper meanings into.
I'm reminded of something which is very peculiarly European and, for someone like Hogarth, peculiarly English. That is what Hogarth said in his analysis of beauty in the middle of the 18th century, was the line of beauty, which was a sinuous, shallow S. And if you look at that, the sinuous, shallow S is something which is very, very much part of the Art Nouveau. And I think it was tapping into something which was, if you like, pre-Renaissance, the Art Nouveau was, and yet was absolutely modern, and was breaking down this barrier between the arts and the crafts.
The Vienna secession took the city by storm, with the first exhibition attracting almost 60,000 visitors. They were able to enjoy works by artists from abroad, as well as the best new Viennese talent. And the works on show were not restricted to paintings. Sculptures, graphic works and drawings were all shown, breaking down the barriers between fine and applied arts. Klimt moved into graphic work with his exhibition poster and with an illustration for the secession's own magazine, The Sacred Spring. But at the second secession event, late in 1898, it was a Klimt oil painting that made the biggest impact. This is Pallas Athene, the Greek goddess of wisdom and the arts. The figure is not instantly recognizable. The image is primarily one of the erotic, literally dripping with golden, seductive power. The provocative nature of Pallas Athene incensed some critics, who referred to it as the demon of the secession. The barbed comments of the critics did not worry Klimt. He was fully committed to his own agenda, as the canvas The Naked Truth shows. The depiction of pubic hair was a bold move in 1899, but the quote in the frame above could be more significant still. Taken from the work of the great German dramatist Schiller, it makes the artist's message clear. Great art is created by the few for the benefit of the few.
Here we get a work which smacks you in the face, really, and it smacked the people in the face at the time. It's really a full frontal nude, which is shocking. It was regarded as shocking, because here he was moving away from the classicism, the decent classicism of Alma Tadema, of Henry Moore in this country, of classical artists, academic artists at the Salon in Paris. It's if you were draped with, if a woman's body was draped with something which looked vaguely classical, with a few convenient classical pillars behind, then it was decent. But as Manny had found at the beginning of the 19th century, if you do a painting of a woman facing you, looking at you, who is contemporary, that is at the present, then that's shocking, that's terrible.
The themes and techniques of Naked Truth became recurring features of Klimt's work. But at the time the painting was completed, the artist was engaged with other, very different projects. Around 1898, he began to create the first of his many landscape pictures. In 1900, Klimt created an amazing canvas depicting the great Viennese composer Schubert at the piano. One critic claimed it was the greatest Austrian painting ever. Sadly, this haunting, impressionistic image was destroyed during the Second World War. The Second World War later claimed the most controversial works of his career, his ceiling paintings for the Great Hall of Vienna University. Although this major commission was issued in 1894, it was only in 1900, at a secession exhibition, that Klimt first revealed his university work. His task was to paint 3 large allegorical paintings depicting philosophy, medicine, and jurisprudence. In 1900, he displayed his unfinished painting of philosophy. The result sparked outrage. The university authorities had expected a recognizable celebration of reason and wisdom. What they got was something very different.
There was no ordered sort of classical composition of figures which were easily seen as representing, in this case, philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, or whatever. It was a vague bunching of figures, basically, they regarded it was. And they revolted. Something like 87 professors of the various departments were up in arms and wrote letters, the equivalent of writing to the Times, complaining about the vision was unclear, the figures were unclear, the concept was unclear. It seemed to be unclear as what they were on about. You could see what they were meaning in one sense. That didn't seem to get them very far, the academics. This thing was still going ahead. And so they got it raised in Parliament, and so there was a parliamentary debate about this. And by 1905, the saga was dragged on for that length of time. Klimt himself didn't wish anymore to be compromised and decided to withdraw from the commission altogether.
No less than 87 university professors condemned the work, and a similar reaction greeted the remaining paintings in the university series. In 1901, medicine was seen as illustrating the power of disease more than that of medicinal advances, and the so-called Klimt affair was debated in the Austrian parliament. The final painting, Jurisprudence, was also widely criticized. The surviving photograph reveals a painting of the harshest, most unforgiving brand of justice. Sadly, the loss of all 3 of these huge canvases in a 1945 fire means that contemporary audiences will never be able to appreciate the terror of the original work. In the end, Klimt grew tired of the whole university affair and bought back his paintings from the Ministry of Culture. Annoyed by the conservative reaction to his work, he hit back in a 1902 canvas entitled Goldfish. Klimt originally considered calling the work To My Critics. The proposed title suggests a mischievous nature, but little is known about the character of Gustav Klimt. His personality is assessed purely on the basis of his art, and the early 20th century saw him put his public controversies behind him whilst he created some of the greatest images of his career. He continued to create major allegorical works such as the so-called Beethoven Frieze, a reinterpretation of the composer's legendary Ninth Symphony, the choral symphony that concludes with the power of love celebrated in The Kiss to the Whole World from the Ode to Joy. Klimt also maintained a busy schedule of portraiture and increasingly landscape. Every summer he left Vienna to stay with his mistress at her family home in the country. There he painted canvases like this image of fruit trees, and in 1902 this beech grove. The strong sense of decorative pattern can almost be seen as a precursor to the abstract expressionism of the later 20th century.